Welcome to the Wolf and the Doctors podcast. I'm your host, Glenn Curry, alongside my co-host, Dr. John Devereaux.
You already know I'm excited for the conversation that we're getting ready to have today. So let's start off with our quote of the week. Now, the quote for this week comes from Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and he said that success isn't always about greatness, it's about consistency. Consistent hard work leads to success. So let me get your thoughts real quick on that quote.
Man, dude, I that's a good one. I agree 100%. I think that that's the one thing I could say, man. Most people that I've seen that are successful usually are the people who are the most consistent in what it is that they do. So, but I think like the hard work and the consistency got to go hand in hand, right? You can't be consistent but give lazy work, right? You got to be consistent and give 100% effort. So I agree 100%.
Well, that actually ties me into what I wanted to talk about today, because you said like you got to be consistent, but you also have to make sure that you're giving 100% effort as well. So what if you're consistent, and this is let's put yourself back like when you first started, maybe like either your real estate business, photography business, or any of those other business ventures that you had.
Okay.
It's easy to be consistent in what you're doing, but what do you do when you don't necessarily like have the equipment or the skills? You're consistent in what you're doing, but the results aren't what you are wanting. How do you really address that?
Dude, I think that's like every early on entrepreneur, right? Because I think like, here's the thing, like we think in order to be great, right? I'll give you an example. You and I, when we were doing the photography, right? We oftentimes we see a lot of these, photographers, big equipment, but they don't have the skills, right?
Yeah.
I think you just got to start with what you got, right? You got to start with what you have, and usually it probably ain't the best equipment. It usually ain't what you need to kind of scale your business, but it's enough to get started. And I think if you kind of get started with what you have, you'll eventually get more than what you got. So, yeah.
I like that. Hold on, because I like what you said, but I forgot it already. But say that one more time, because I can't rewind this.
I was saying, man, dude, if you start with less than what you have, you eventually get more than what you got.
And I think that's so true, because and it's if you stay persistent, in what you're doing. Because I remember you ran off this quote one time, I think it was for our New Year's episode, where you were talking about the amount of people who actually quit like within like that first year of being an entrepreneur. And it's something about pushing through, and like you said, working with what you have to position yourself to be in a space where you're able to, elaborate a little bit more on whatever it is that you're doing. So I know for myself, like when I first started my photography business, I didn't have the best camera, but I was doing a whole bunch of events. But then eventually, like while you're in those trenches of learning, you learn what's necessary or what's needed. And the camera that I thought I needed was not the one that I actually did need. You start to learn like what you can and what you can't work with and without, I think.
And you know what I really like about that analogy, bro, is when we were starting out the photography, what we did was we didn't worry about our equipment. We just tried to make sure that our skills outweigh our lack of equipment, right? So we went twice as hard in our skill, because eventually our equipment was going to, match up to our skill level. So we made sure our skills was on point. That way we can still kind of play that same game on the same field as everybody else.
And I think that's actually an advantage of starting out in lack. And this goes a little bit deeper, as well. Yeah. But when you start off in that lack, I think it forces you to focus on developing good habits or good, making sure that your skills are up to par. So then when you do eventually upgrade your equipment, it makes it so much easier for your business to run smoothly, I think personally.
Yeah, you know what? And here's another thing too, is you start to look at your business as a whole, right? So for me, because I didn't have all the equipment, and when, like I said, when you're starting off, you think that you need this big old camera, you need these big old lights, but you really don't. But what I did was I started to scale in my business for like, my customer service, right? I wanted to make sure my customer service outweighed any of my competition, right? I wanted to make sure that, you know, my website was on point, things that you got control over. You know,
Exactly.
even though you might not have the necessary tools that you need, the things that are in your advantage, or I mean, are at your disposal and you can kind of take advantage of, those are the things that you gotta, you know, grasp real quick and, you know, try to expand like interpersonal
Yeah.
skills.
Yeah, I agree. You do all those things that don't really cost you anything. If money is an option, I mean, if money is a hindrance at the beginning, which it typically is for a lot of entrepreneurs. I remember my godbrother. He told me this story once before. He's an artist. You know, he loves to draw, and I know that's something that you enjoy as well.
Yeah.
So he was telling me how when he first started drawing, he had like, you know, pencils that he was finding around the house and things like that. So they weren't the best, but he learned how to draw with subpar equipment. So eventually when he got to this space and he got into like an arts program at school where they were providing him with those graphite pencils and those top tier, you know, utensils, he said his artwork went to like a whole new level. But it wouldn't have got that way if he wasn't pretty much putting in like that groundwork with those rinky-dink pencils that he was originally using.
Facts.
So I think it's really is something into like, you know, finessing the skills and making sure that your skills are up to par, and then, you know, evolving your business with better equipment. Because a lot of times people tend to focus on, I need the biggest and the latest and this, that, and the other. When, like you said earlier, you can have all the equipment in the world, but your skills just suck, you know, for lack of better terms. And you're not even scratching the surface of what that equipment can produce, you know?
Agreed, man, 100%.
But let me throw this question out to you, just because I came across it earlier in the week. And I was like, man, let me get Glenn's thoughts on this. So what is more important to you?
Huh?
Exactly. You know, what's more important, the reliability of your equipment or keeping your costs down? Because that's always going to be the trade-off in your business. You know, you can always buy more, but then you also want to make sure that your business is profitable. So you don't want to spend unnecessarily.
Oh, dude, that is a great question. I think keeping costs down is the most important, because if you are, you know, if you're maxing yourself out, it don't matter if you got the best equipment in the world, you're going to go out of business, right? You got to make sure the cost is as low as possible, because, I mean, truthfully, you can kind of do the same job as a lot of these professionals in whatever, you know, whatever industry you are in. If you just, like we said, if you just kind of got your skills and all your craft in order, and you kind of just went deep and just start fine tuning your craft, you can do a lot with less. But the objective of it is to keep the cost down as much as possible so that you are able to scale.
Okay.
You beg to differ? You beg to differ?
Of course.
Yeah, go ahead.
So for me, it's all about that consistency of your equipment, or making sure that your stuff is reliable. And just because I've been in some situations where the equipment went down on a job, and like you gotta like, you know, kind of, you know, figure out like, okay, you know, how do I rectify this? And that's the worst thing, trying to fix your equipment while you're at a job. So for me, I pay that little extra premium, but it gives me that peace of mind that every time this printer is going to go, it's going to do what it's supposed to do. Now, of course, you know, there's still like, you know, some pitfalls sometimes.
Yeah.
But that reliability of that equipment is like key for me. And I think we see it differently because of the different industries that we're in. I'm assuming you're applying like your real estate hat.
Yeah.
With your answer. Okay. Yeah.
I am.
And I can understand that.
Because I think ultimately, you know, it does depend on what industry you're in.
Yeah, I think you definitely want to make sure that you can minimize your costs as much as possible. But I think in certain situations, you do have to spend that money in your business, just because, and you and I'll use a photography example just because I'm sure our listeners are tired of hearing of this, but, you know, weddings are probably one of the toughest photography gigs that you can get, because there's no do-overs. You can't pose a bride walking down the aisle again, you know? So that's where, if your equipment isn't up to par in those moments,
Yeah.
You just kind of ruined the whole event. And that's why you get paid the big bucks, you know, for those events. So, but kind of switching gears to, like you say, with the real estate,
Yeah.
you know, if I'm investing in a property and I need to do repairs or upgrades, I'm not trying to, you know, go state of the art with some of the stuff that I'm putting in these places. I want to try to minimize those costs, but get get an efficient outcome, you know, in a sense.
Absolutely. So like I think like you said, man, it just depends on what industry you're applying that logic to, you know, because it might not work in every scenario, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It probably only work in, you know, real estate or photography or, you know, marketing or whatever the case is. It just depends on how you're trying to apply it. But I think both of them still cool though.
Absolutely. I think it's a combination. Like all the things, is somewhere in the middle, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
So with your business, and I think I've asked you this question before, since you say like you try to keep your costs as minimal as possible, you know, how do you determine when it is time to put money back into your business? Because a lot of times I think entrepreneurs, you know, the money that you make, it goes into like your personal account to fund, you know, this, that, or the other. But how important is it to at least initially invest that money back into your business to either purchase new equipment or even just to build kind of like a safety net for, you know, unexpected expenses?
I think from day one, right? It's very important. I think that, at least for me, I try to, you know, because you want to still live, right? You don't want to put every dime that you make into your business. Then it's like you're working for free, right? But I think like the rule of thumb is to put like 20 to 30% in your business, and then you live off the rest of it. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm a firm believer in you got to keep feeding the beast, right? You got to keep investing in your business in order for it to grow. So if you're just, I don't know, if you just, you know, robbing a bank every time you get, you know, some money and profit, I mean, you ain't gonna go nowhere with the business.
How important, I guess, is it in your opinion? And,
Okay.
Because I know like you like to diversify, you know, your portfolio in a sense. How important is it to use that money to create different avenues within your business? So let's say for instance, my wife, she does crafting. So she makes t-shirts, you know, maybe the money that she makes from the business is now going to fund a different avenue in her business. Or even like with me for photography, maybe I do portraits, but then eventually I want to pivot into like, you know, adding drone photography or real estate photography. You know, how important is it to have multiple avenues, I guess, within your own business that you can use to make money? Or do you think you can just stick with just one thing and that be it?
I think that you can stick to one thing. It just depends, man. If you feel like you capped out, right? I don't want to put another leg onto my business and I still haven't mastered the main business, right? You wearing too many hats in your own business, and it starts to get confusing. You start to lose focus. People start to forget what it is that you really do. So I think it's important to master whatever it is that you do. I mean, but you don't necessarily got to add that second leg to your business, especially if you're already growing, doing what it is that you do. Now, if you're looking at it saying like, hey, look, I think this other one will kind of complement what I'm doing and be just as successful, then you can kind of start thinking about things like that. But I would definitely do like a trial run. I wouldn't just kind of go straight into there trying to, you know, add this second layer to my business, man, because you can ultimately destroy your whole business just like that, man.
So I like the analogy that you used of putting another leg on in your business. And it reminds me of this analogy that I saw a while back. And the guy was talking about you always want to make sure that you have multiple streams of income. And this goes back to like, you know, just if you have a 9-to-5, but also having like something else on the side. He says, if it's only one leg, like if you're sitting in a chair that only has one leg, how stable is that going to be? But if you have like 2, 3, or 4 legs, it's going to be a lot harder for you to knock that thing over. And, you know, it provides a little bit more stability. And I think that's the way that we need to look at it. I think, you know, from day one, we've always said like, it's okay to have a 9-to-5, but that can't be your only source of income.
Facts.
So they said that if you have one stream of income, you're one step removed from, not having anything, because that job at the end of the day could just let you go. But if you have multiple legs, maybe your 9 to 5, maybe the side business, maybe the things that you're investing in, whether that's real estate, stocks, bonds, or any other types of assets, cryptocurrency, whatever it might be, it gives you a little bit more stability. It's like adding those extra legs to that chair.
You know what, you did just kind of make a great point, man. And because I remember when the pandemic happened, right? I could have been screwed, right? It's because if I would have just depended on my paycheck, right, this is the only thing that I'm making and things like that. When that pandemic hit, I got let go. Mm-hmm. Like, I didn't know, I didn't prepare for it. But what happened was I had a second stream of income, and I had my license as a realtor. So what happened was my realtor had kicked in, and that now became my primary income. So I didn't panic too hard. You know what I'm saying? Because I knew, hey, look, I got this real estate backing me up. I know I can make some money doing this because I was already doing it. So it just kicked into gear once that happened.
And I think that's so important, and I don't want that to be lost with what you're talking about. That state of always being prepared for the unexpected. Like I'm assuming like you weren't anticipating that you were going to lose that job.
Not at all.
But you were, months in advance, like, hey, this is something else that can bring in revenue, working towards the real estate stuff. And I think that's what we always need to be doing. Always need to be working towards something just in case. They say you have a rainy day fund, but like, what's like your backup plans? Like in case, your 9 to 5 doesn't work out, or in case whatever it is that you're doing as an entrepreneur doesn't work out. You got to always have something, in the tuck, which means that you always got to have something that you're working towards today,
So what do you say to the people who don't have a second stream of income? You're like, how do they get started, or how do they even know how to kind of get that second stream of income? Like, do they read a book? Do they ask a friend? Like, what do you think they should do?
And we always say this, it really goes back to like finding whatever it is that you're passionate about. When you find or identify whatever it is that you're passionate about, that's what's going to drive you when you leave that 9 to 5 to start putting in work for yourself. You say it all the time, man, like you don't want to work, 9 to 5 for someone else and then not spend those, remaining hours of the day investing in yourself. Absolutely. Or your potential. And I think that's where it starts. When you identify what it is that you're passionate about, that's what's going to help you to put the work in that's needed to create those second or third, fourth streams of income. If I'm not passionate about stocks, I'm not going to put the time in to invest in understanding it. And if I don't understand it, how am I going to thrive in it?
Absolutely.
So you got to be vested in whatever it is that you're anticipating or, wanting to work on.
How much does somebody save up in case that just on any rainy day, right? In case they are let go, or in case one of those streams of income dries up, how much should they kind of have? How much money should they have in the tuck?
That's a situation by situation.
Okay.
Your bills in the Chicago area are going to be a lot different than my bills here in the Dixon area, right? Because you live in a big city versus me in a very rural town. So like if I have a couple $1,000s in the bank, that might last me a couple months down here. That's about a week for you up in Chicago.
At least 2. I get 2 weeks out of it.
So I think that's varies. Like you always see like these arbitrary numbers that you should have saved up, but I don't think that's really realistic. People might have kids, have kids with certain needs. It's too many different variables out there to kind of give a concrete number for that.
Okay.
But
gotcha.
You got to have something.
Yeah.
You don't want that to be a zero.
I think the rule of thumb is to like have, 6 months of reserves. Whatever your bills are, at least have 6 months in the reserve.
But that's where we get into like the equity area, because a lot of people don't have that, 6 months of reserves. A lot of people are living, paycheck to paycheck, or being able to maybe save like 5 to 10% of what they're bringing in because they might have, X amount in bills going out every single month. So it's hard. It's hard. But that's where that discipline really kicks in. Like, I could just speak for myself. Like, learning to save was probably one of the tougher things, because we live in a society where it's so much instant gratification that you don't really put too much stock in the long term.
Yeah.
And, you know, it took me being around other people who had that, you know, mindset to say, okay, this is what they're doing. This is what I need to do. And that's why I was so blessed to be able to jump into my career at an early age. And, you know, I was like 24 when I started teaching.
Dang, you was 24? That young?
24, 24, 25, maybe 25.
Wow.
You know, when I first started teaching. But I was able to be around people who have been teaching for like 30 plus years, you know, and if you set your pride and all that stuff aside, you'll start to learn from people, and you'll see like some of the things that they're doing, what they're not doing. You know, I knew some people in my department that was making 6 figures driving a 20-year-old car. Man. And I was looking at them like, you know, you making all this money, like why don't you, you know, get this? Oh, well, I don't want my kid to have to pay $1 for college, and they're going to an Ivy League school. So, you know, there's your trade-off. Do I want to have, you know, $40,000 in my vehicle, or my son's tuition paid for for a year? You know, it's that opportunity cost in economics. So you start to see how people value money. And when you shift your perception of money and you start to use it as a tool rather than just a means to an end for instant gratification, it helps you to develop that long-term mindset. And when you have that long-term mindset, saving today becomes so much easier.
It does.
Because you see what's down the road. And we need to get like a financial advisor on here, because I would love to, you know, talk to one of our financial advisors about, you know, the money habits. Because if you didn't grow up with money, sometime you tend to mismanage money. Absolutely. And if you didn't grow up with money and you start a business and you have those bad money habits, that's going to lead over into your business, you know?
Absolutely. I've seen many times, man, you know, close friends of mine, you know, start a business, but, you know, the business ends up going under, or they got to close up shop because of bad spending habits, man. It's because, I mean, you can have the greatest idea in the world, the greatest business, you know, greatest marketing and everything, but if you got really bad spending habits, your business eventually would take a toll, you know. So, I mean, if I believe every entrepreneur, every business person should have a dedicated accountant or financial advisor in order to make sure that they are making sure that their business is able to sustain for years to come.
Yeah. And I'd love to get your take on this question, because, you know, we discussed this on previous episodes. You know, both of us have a similar background, you know, in terms of like, you know, how we grew up, and not having a lot of financial resources available. So how did that kind of feed into you as an entrepreneur? If you didn't grow up with money and like, you know, manage money, or did you learn how to manage money earlier on because you didn't grow up with money? Like, how did you develop that, and then how did that translate to your business?
Well, it was I developed that out of being scared, right? Because most times I saw my family members struggling, right? And I was like, man, like what is everybody doing that they all end up in the same situation, right? And it was always money management. Not all of them, but some of them, right? So I told myself, you know what? One thing I'm not going to do is I'm not going to struggle financially. So I just started reading, right? And I think that's the first step, is inexpensive, right? Get your knowledge up. Then I started figuring out ways to just save, right? I was young, bro. I wasn't saving, you know, $1,000 a week. I was saving $1 here, $2 here, you know what I'm saying? And a couple dollars here, you know, add it up. And then over time, I just had a nice little chunk, right? And then I started to say, okay, if I could save like this over time and put my money into something that's going to grow me more money, then I can really become rich, right? But it all started from me reading, right, and figuring out what to do, because what I did was, okay, I knew eventually I'm not going to be broke forever. I knew eventually if I keep saving, one day I have a nice amount of money. And then you got to start thinking, what do I do when you get a nice amount of money? I don't want to blow it. So what do? You start reading more, and you kind of go from there. And that's all I did.
What I love about what you're saying is you're doing stuff that doesn't cost money.
Yeah.
You know, educating yourself is free, you know, for the most part.
Yeah.
And that's golden, man. And
yeah,
you know, I remember, like you said, you find ways to kind of, you know, get what you need, but as cheap as possible. I don't know if you remember, and this is a funny story. Like when we were, I think this must have been both of our senior year at Western, WIU, and like we was trying to go to the career fair, and neither one of us had a suit. I don't know if you remember.
We did.
So,
oh man,
neither one of us had a suit. So we was like, I had found like this little coupon for Express.
Oh,
like, you know,
yeah, yeah. I remember it now. Yeah.
It was like buy one get one free.
Yeah.
So we drove up. It was like an hour and a half drive from the college campus, and we both went half, and both of us got something to wear to that career fair because like we couldn't just show up.
Yeah. Hey, resources, man. You know, collabing, group economics.
That exactly, man. So I mean, I think you it all starts with that self-awareness. Like you understand where you're at, but like you said, you realize that's not where you want to stay.
Yeah.
Nor will it be where you stay, because you have that desire for something more. And when you have that desire, it makes it a little bit easier to make like those short-term sacrifices for those long-term solutions.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, that's interesting. I would love to get some of our listeners and viewers, you know, as I'm looking at the time, some of our listeners and viewers, I'd love to hear how you handle or manage money in your business, because it's like, that's like one of those, you know, one size does not fit all. You know, what works for me might not work for Glenn, which might not work for Sally, which might not work for, you know, John down the street. So I would love to get some feedback from our listeners and viewers, you know, about managing money, how you learned to manage your money for your business.
Absolutely. And that's another episode of the Wolf and the Doctor podcast. Again, I'm your host, Glenn Curry, alongside my co-host, Dr. John Devereaux. And whatever you guys are listening to or streaming this on, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below.